Hi all, thanks for joining me. Today I'm going to talk about testing hormones in perimenopause and menopause. A lot of the time I have women coming to see me saying, I want to test my hormones, I want to know what's going on. And often they've been told by their GPs, don't worry about testing your hormones, it's not worth it. And to be truthful, I kind of agree. Hormones in perimenopause particularly can fluctuate wildly. And so when we get a blood draw taken for the hormones, we don't necessarily know if we've captured the snapshot of exactly what's going on. So it's very hard to use that and to work from it clinically. So today I will go through which hormones there are and the different kinds of tests that we can do for these. Now, here are the players. Our estrogen, our progesterone, you probably know about them. Testosterone's another one, interestingly, we often forget about as women, but we do have it. And the fourth one I wanted to mention, which really impacts the other three, is our cortisol. And there's some really interesting ways that we can test for these. Traditionally, GPs, even I, will do blood panels for these hormones. You've probably had a script given to you, a referral to a path lab, and gone and had your bloods taken. Maybe they were hormonal, maybe they were for something else. So you probably are well aware of that. There are also saliva hormone tests. We can actually spit into a tube in the privacy of our own homes, and the saliva is also going to have a hormonal profile in it of these hormones here. We used to do that. It is now thought not to be as reliable except for cortisol. So estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone are now no longer really done through saliva. They are, however, with a Dutch test, which I'll be talking to you more about, more easily understood. This Dutch test is looking at the metabolites of these hormones that are excreted in our urine. So let's go. Ah, here we go. Blood. Most often, the reference ranges are very good in blood. We have had uh, tens of thousands, if not, I couldn't, hundreds of thousands of samples, and we have very good reference ranges for blood. So we really understand that, except for when you get to perimenopause. And hormones are just everywhere, and it's not necessarily a really great idea to be able to get the snapshot from blood. Um, Saliva, as I've mentioned, um, it's got their bound and or it's got their unbound. What you'll find in blood is we get the total testosterone, we get the total estrogen, the total progesterone, the total amount of the hormone that's circulating. Now, that isn't necessarily that helpful because what I want to know is what is active in my body rather than just how much do I have. And there are ways in blood, which I won't bother going into, of actually finding out from the total amount of hormone how much do I actually have that's active. But in saliva and urine, all we get is active hormone. We only understand how much we've got that is impacting our body and therefore potentially causing us symptoms. So, from that perspective, the urine and the saliva can be really quite helpful from a clinical point of view. Both saliva and urine obviously are non-invasive, not someone's not sticking a needle into your arm, and they can be run from your own home, which they generally are. What happens in my clinical practice is we have a discussion. If you choose to go and do one of these tests, a Dutch test in particular, I can organise it, and then the kit gets sent to you. You do it in the privacy of your own home, send it back to the path lab, and then I get the results. Um, Saliva, as I've mentioned, is really the only it's reliable only for cortisol, not for the other tests. And I'm not going to talk on too much on HRT. Some women are on it, some women are not, and whatever is suitable for you is fine by me personally, and certainly me professionally as a naturopath and nutritionist. However, saliva is not reliable for transdermal anything. So if you've got a gel or a patch or a cream, then we cannot use saliva. It is not really helpful for us because the saliva will concentrate the hormones that have been rubbed on the skin. So it's not, again, it's not giving us a true reading. So you can see some of the problems we've got. Estrogen, start with the biggest player. There are three kinds of estrogen: estradiol, estriol, and estrone. Now you can see estrone is the estrogen predominantly that we make after we've had menopause. Estriol is the one that we are using while we're reproducing. So, from whenever you started menstruating through till the last menstrual cycle that you have, it's predominantly going to be estriol. Estriol, gosh, they're all the same, aren't they? Is going to be the hormone estrogen that is more is higher in pregnancy. So now we know the different kinds of estrogen. There are a couple of pathways out of the body that estrogen take. I have done a shorter YouTube on this initially, and so I can send a link in the show notes for this as well. But in terms of estrogen metabolism through the liver, there are three pathways you can see here. The 2-hydroxy in the green, the 2-hydroxy pathway is actually preferential. That's where we want at least half of our estrogen going down, if not more. It is lower risk, which means that it is less likely to cause us estrogen dominant problems, less likely to create issues with proliferation and cell division and potentially estrogen dominant cancers. The 4 pathway you can see in the middle in the red is for a very good reason. If estrogen is going more preferentially down this particular pathway, it can lead to DNA damage. And as you can see there, it's a higher risk for breast cancer. It is also influenced by alcohol. So sorry to be the fun police, but the more we drink, the more estrogen we are likely to put down this particular proliferative pathway, which is not ideal. The other thing that we need to consider is all synthetic estrogens will potentially come down this pathway as well. And there is a note there about methylation, which again I won't go into, but there are some women who have difficulty with putting the estrogen down this particular pathway correctly. And so again, we could do another test for understanding methylation. And if that is a problem for someone, then we can look into how we can support that pathway. You can see in the green there, DIM, indole 3-carbinol, and some activated B vitamins can be really helpful for shunting the estrogen down this less proliferative pathway, the 2-hydroxy-estrogen pathway in the green. Just a shout out to the 16-hydroxy pathway. It is a metabolite. As I've mentioned, it is higher in the pregnant women. And potentially, it's not ideal pathway. It's not as bad as the 4. It's not great, but it's more likely perhaps the heavy periods, fibroids, and so on. And in the Dutch test or the urine metabolite test, we can actually figure out which of these pathways is more predominant and how much estrogen is going down these particular pathways, which is an absolute win for us clinically, because then we can actually see how much estrogen you've got and where is it going? Is it being cleared correctly? And if it's not, then we can do something about that. We cannot look at this in saliva or in blood. We can only look at it in the urine test. So this slide is basically saying that it is saliva is not really used anymore. It used to be, but we've come obviously to newer and better methods. And the Dutch test, I feel like I'm really pushing for that, but I actually am. That's the one I use clinically. If I get a woman who has got blood results, I will most definitely use them and work from them as well. Because the Dutch test is very comprehensive. However, it is relatively expensive as well. And here is just a sample of the pathways that I mentioned. You can see the estrone, the E1, the estradiol, E2, and the estriol, E3. And you can see those three pathways there, the 2, the 4, and the 16 hydroxyestrogen. Yep. And the red line there going down the middle to the quinone and DNA damage that is as a result of more of the estrogen going down that 4 pathway. And you can see the little dials there. I should have pointed that out. That's allowing us to go, how much is there and where is it going? Yeah. So it's a really great test to be able to see visually what we need to do, but also there's an enormous report that goes with it as well. Progesterone. We love progesterone. It is our calming hormone. Interestingly, progesterone drops first in perimenopause. So this is often why, and I've done quite a few reels and so on this, and why we get so much more anxiety in perimenopause. It's because this really progesterone, which is, I'm going to show you, goes into allopregnanolone, which is a neurosteroid that really helps calm us down. And when that progesterone is declining, so too are our calming hormones and neurosteroids in our brain, leading us to have heightened responses. And you can see here the progesterone, it's either made down into alpha or beta, pregnenolone, pregnenolone. Gosh, there's so many hard words here. So again, in this Dutch test, it's really helpful to be able to see between the 5 alpha and the 5 beta, because 5 alpha is more likely to go to be an issue. And what we're really trying to do is get it to go to allopregnanolone, which I've mentioned is a neurosteroid. It's a metabolite of progesterone, and it really helps attach onto the GABA-A receptors in the body and in the brain. And that is what's going to calm us down. And just not necessarily calm us down, but just keep us calm. It also is going to be a wonderful thing for sleep. A lot of the herbs that we give for sleep and even some of the sleeping medications are also trying to attach on to this GABA receptor, which of course we're trying to naturally make with our progesterone. And again, maybe a conversation to have with your GPs if you're on oral micronized progesterone, so permetrium or something like that. That may be or if you're considering to do that, that may be a good way of increasing allopregnanolone. I've seen that regularly. And if hormone replacements or anything of that nature is something that you're considering, that's a great option to have, but you need to speak to your GP about that. Testosterone. It's not just for men. In women, we have smaller amounts, but it is related to our libido and our energy and motivation, our particularly muscle mass and bone density, which we don't think about a lot of the time, particularly bone density. I see a lot of women just coming in thinking, oh my goodness, what happened to my bones? And it's not all just about, oh, well, I'll just take testosterone and I'll get my bone health back. Unfortunately, it's not that simple. We generally do use blood for testosterone. It is really helpful, and it is a relatively um, specific test that can give us a lot of information about the testosterone. There are a couple of pathways, again, 5-alpha and 5-beta, and you can see here with these little dials again, what we're trying to do is perhaps make a little less of the 5-alpha, which, I mean, I guess we don't want to have too little or too much of anything. In these hormones, what we're really looking for is the Goldilocks, just the right amount. Yep. And you can see there by the fan shape at the bottom, we kind of want in the middle of the 5-alpha and the 5-beta, not one way, not the other way. But I've often seen too, if women come in and they've been told through the blood test that their testosterone is fine, when we look at these metabolites, which we cannot do in blood, if we've got that 5-alpha pathway more predominant, then what we find is women are more sensitive to the testosterone that they have. So the total testosterone they have may not necessarily be over the reference range, but what they have is they are more sensitive to it. And this can lead to a lot of the health issues that can go along with testosterone, particularly for women in perimenopause and menopause, hair loss, which again is something I've commented a lot on my social media platforms. And I just important to know that transdermal testosterone is not something that you can look at in saliva. And I think I've mentioned that a few times. If you are on any transdermal gel, patch, cream, please do not stop taking it. Please go and see your GP if you're concerned. And our lucky last, cortisol, our stress hormone. Cortisol is fabulous. It's the reason we're alive. Mostly, there are a few reasons, but without cortisol, we would die. So it's fairly important. So cortisol also has what we call a diurnal rhythm. It has a rhythm. It rises in the morning and it dips during the day and into the evening. And it kind of mirrors melatonin, which is supports our sleep cycle. So what I've done, again, cortisol in a blood test, what I find is there, and I don't usually run this, what I find is the GPs run it and you might be able to get to a path lab at 7:30 if you're lucky. Often it's about 8 o'clock. But if you've been up for a few hours, you may not be capturing exactly what's going on for your cortisol. And if it's high or low, there could be other reasons why. If you've slept really badly, if you've eaten before you've had the test, if you've been stressed on the way to the path lab and maybe been running late or something, couldn't find a park, all of those things will impact your blood reading of cortisol. So may not necessarily be helpful. And I love looking at cortisol if I've got anyone who's waking in the evening or waking during the night. If they're feeling anxious for no reason, I again would have a look at the progesterone. If their blood glucose was unstable or their energy through the day wasn't stable, or if they're just feeling what I commonly hear is tired and wired. Yeah. We can do through the urine samples again a CAR, cortisol awakening response, and we can also look at it through the day. So a CAR is, you can see here, is on waking. So as soon as you wake up, you spit into a tube in the privacy of your own home. So this is not a urinary test, this is a saliva test. And then you do it again 30 minutes after you've woken up and then 60 minutes after you've woken up. And that gives us our cortisol awakening response. And there's a lot of good evidence now looking at that is actually more indicative of our cortisol pattern, if you will, and we can really tell a lot from that. You can then continue on doing cortisol samples through the afternoon into the evening. And that is also really good. You can see the reference range here, and you can, in the grey there is what we actually want you to do. And you can see elevated cortisol there in the blue and a slightly diminished cortisol there in the green. We can also look at free and metabolized cortisol. So we want to know what's free and active, and we also want to know what we're storing because there are reasons around that as well. So the Dutch test, we've got, as I mentioned, the CAR test, the cortisol awakening. It looks at the metabolized cortisol, which of course can also give us an more information about the adrenal and stress picture. It looks at the curve throughout the day if you choose to continue on doing samples through the day. And it looks at our cortisol and cortisone ratio, which tells us more about other issues like thyroid, like insulin, and our metabolic health. So it's a really great snapshot of what role it's playing in our health. And none of this is available from a blood draw. So all of this information is something we need to get through our saliva test. So there's a summary. I really won't go through that again, but suffice to say, there are advantages for blood, there are advantages for urinary metabolites and the Dutch test. The saliva really is only done for the cortisol. So if you've got a blood test, bring it along. We can work from that if you're concerned. If you've got any HRT or any transdermal, any gel patch, whatever, you need to speak to your GPs about monitoring that and about whether the dose is right for you. That is not something a naturopath or a nutritionist will do. We can look more thoroughly at the cortisol picture. And if you have a family history or if you've got a history of estrogen dominant cancers, then you may want to consider looking at the metabolic picture of the estrogen there with the Dutch test. That can be really, really helpful. So I hope that might have explained a little bit and given you some insight into what we test and how we test for it. If you're still wondering, you're most welcome to book a discovery call with me. There is absolutely no obligation to book in with me, but if you just want to have a short chat with me and understand a little more, you're most welcome to reach out. If you think this is something that you want to know more information about, you can leave a comment below, let me know, and I can do further videos. Or if you think there's someone else that might benefit, I'd love it if you'd share with them. Thank you.